I've reached my limit. I hate to ask, but can I crash at your place for a few days?
Dad had been kicked out of the family home by my sisters and Mom, and now he stood at my doorstep. Seeing Dad, who had always been so strong, talk about reaching his limit, I blamed myself. "I'm sorry, Dad." In that moment, as I tried to apologize for my inability to help alleviate his suffering, my husband Ethan spoke up.
"Let's live with your father-in-law."
"Are you sure?" I turned to Ethan, surprise evident in my voice. Dad, too, could barely hide his shock, his eyes wide open. "My name is Emily. I'm 26 years old. Ethan and I started dating in college, and we got married 2 years ago. Our days are filled with a fulfilling work-life balance. Ethan is my best supporter, always by my side. I never thought I'd find someone who gives me such confidence, let alone marry them. As the youngest of 3 sisters, I grew up in an environment where I could never go against my mom and my sisters. I was always the last one in line for attention from Mom, and also the lowest in rank among my sisters. Every time I voiced an opinion, sharp words would come flying back at me. Over time, I stopped expressing myself and started to suppress my feelings. I bore the treatment of being treated like a servant by my mom and my sisters without complaining. "I wanted a boy. When I found out you were another girl, I was so disgusted. Grace and Ashley are enough for girls. You're an unwanted child, and yet here you are in this house. If you want to stay here, you have to work." Mom often belittled me like this. Even if you tell me that, how many times have I swallowed my words, the ones I wanted to say back to her? By the time I entered elementary and middle school, I was in charge of most of the household chores, from preparing meals and doing laundry to getting the bath ready. People around me would praise me, saying, "That's impressive," or "You're so responsible." But I only found joy in that at first. "It's a given that you do all these things," Mom would say with no words of thanks or praise. Instead, I was constantly being reprimanded for my cooking or the way I folded the laundry. The one who kept me going through all this was Dad. Unlike Mom and my sisters, Dad loved me and respected me. As the only man in the family, Dad was not well liked by Mom and my sisters, and his power within the family was as low as mine. But he always stood up for me. "I'm sorry, Emily. You always have to put up with so much. If only we could all live in harmony." Dad would often hold me tight and say these things. Despite his early mornings and late nights for work, Dad would always spend his days off with me, fulfilling Mom and my sister's demands together. And he always listened to my feelings and accepted my words. But my mom and her cohorts didn't seem to like that. "There's no one to protect you today," they'd tell me, pushing more chores onto me. They'd hurl harsh words at Dad too, such as, "For a man, low income." And my sisters would follow their lead, laughing and saying, "Disgusting!" and "Don't open your mouth." So no matter how much Dad tried to be a pillar of support, I was becoming increasingly frail. Noticing my distress, Dad said something to me when I entered high school. "Emily, study as much as you can, then go to college. Leave this house and live on your own. You, Emily, have so many possibilities. There's no need to endure and stay in this house forever. I want you to live your life," my father urged me. At his words, I felt both elated and anxious. At the time, my eldest sister Grace, 6 years older than me, was attending a private university. Ashley, 4 years older, was at a vocational school. Mom would often ridicule Dad for his low income and tell me, We're poor because he doesn't bring in money, so you should start working once you graduate from high school. Because of this, I believed our family was financially struggling. Despite that, I worried if Dad was pushing himself too hard, telling me to go to college and live on my own. But Dad insisted there's no need to worry about money.
I feel responsible for making you suffer so much. That's why I don't want you to endure any longer.
Dad,
this is a request from your father. You don't have to worry about anything. Just go to the university you want, study what you want. Find what you love to do. I want you to lead a happy life to make up for the hardship you've been through.
I could feel his strong resolve as he gripped my shoulder, his eyes moist with tears. From then on, I devoted myself to the studies I had neglected. Juggling the overbearing instructions from my mom and sisters, I spent all my remaining time studying at my desk. My hard work paid off, and I was accepted into a university. Dad and I embraced each other, sharing the joy of my acceptance. I kept it a secret from Mom and my sisters until the last minute, only announcing my plans to go to college and live alone on the day I was moving. At that time, Grace had already moved out and was living on her own, leaving only Mom and Ashley at home, who showered me with shouts of rage. I endured their harsh words until the end, finally breaking free from them. I kept my new mobile phone, a gift from Dad, a secret, not telling them which university I was going to or where I was going to live. Though I stayed in touch with Dad, I started a life without any involvement with my mom or my sisters. But just because I escaped from them didn't mean my university life was smooth sailing. I wasn't used to speaking my mind, and as a timid person, I was somewhat invisible in my department, unable to make friends. Then, Ethan reached out to me.
What do you think, Emily?
I was surprised when Ethan, the bright and central figure of the group, spoke to me. I was already uncomfortable speaking in front of people, and being put on the spot by him left me speechless. But Ethan pressed me.
You have thoughts, right? Share them. We won't know unless you say something.
A person who is pushy and doesn't consider other people's feelings. I initially thought of Ethan as pushy and inconsiderate. But as time passed, I came to see the kindness in Ethan, how he respected people's opinions. Thanks to Ethan, I started to make friends. Before long, I found myself drawn to Ethan, and by our third year, our relationship had progressed to dating. When I started dating Ethan, Dad excitedly congratulated us. And when I found a job, when Ethan and I decided to move in together, and when we decided to get married, Dad celebrated my happiness as if it was his own. But I had always been worried about Dad. Since starting university, I hadn't been home and hadn't seen Dad even once. We stayed in touch, but I was still concerned. Dad was living at that place with Mom and the others. I had no doubt he was still enduring snide comments from Mom and Ashley, still spending his days under their domineering instructions. Dad, I'm happy today because of you. Back then, I was powerless and always needed your help. But things have changed. I'm working now and I'm married. I have someone who supports me. So now it's my turn to help you. Please let me know if you're in any trouble. When I announced my marriage, I told him that. Having learned the importance of expressing my feelings to others since being with Ethan, I was finally able to put into words what I had never been able to tell Dad before.
Thank you.
Dad replied that way, but until now, 2 years later, Dad never asked me for help. Furthermore, recently, I heard that Grace, who was supposed to be living alone, quit her job and returned to our parents' house. My worry for Dad had only increased. Then one day, the doorbell rang just as I was confiding in Ethan about how worried I was about Dad. December was almost over, and even though it wasn't even 4 p.m., it was already getting dark outside. We had no scheduled deliveries, so we were surprised when we looked at the screen of the intercom. The person shown by the camera was none other than Dad. I rushed to the front door and opened it. Seeing Dad for the first time in 8 years, his cheeks were hollowed out, and there was more white than black in his hair. He looked visibly unwell. I instinctively knew that his sudden visit without any notice wasn't for a casual reason. "Dad, what's happened? Please come inside. It must be cold outside." Dad was wearing trousers and a long-sleeve shirt, even in December. This seemed too thin. Why would he be outside dressed like that? But the reason was revealed from Dad's mouth. Dad was kicked out of the house by Mom and the others.
"They told me to go buy dessert, so I went to the nearby convenience store. But when I came back, the house was locked. I asked them to open up, but they told me not to come back and didn't let me in."
What?
"I left the house without my phone or jacket, but I waited for several hours and they didn't seem to let me in."
As Dad rubbed his cold body, he told us about what happened that day. I quickly made some hot tea and gave it to Dad. Dad held the cup of tea with both hands to get warm and muttered softly,
"I might not be able to go back to that house again."
Why?
"Ever since Grace came back, Mom and the others' attitude got even worse. I was feeling at my limits too, and then they did this to me. I don't even have the energy to go back. I think I should look for a monthly apartment and think about what to do in the future. I'm sorry, but could I stay here for a few days? I'll leave as soon as I find an apartment."
I was worried, but I hadn't imagined it was this bad. Dad, who never complained before, was talking about his limits? "I'm sorry, Dad." I was about to apologize to Dad for knowing about his troubles and not being able to do anything when
"Let's live with your father."
Ethan raised his voice. "Are you sure?" I turned to my husband in surprise. Dad, too, unable to hide his surprise, opened his eyes wide.
"Sorry for being blunt, especially since we just met, but your father-in-law doesn't look too healthy. I think it would be best if we lived together to help him recover. Everything else can be figured out later, of course, only if he's okay with this."
Ethan's suggestion left Dad and I with nothing but gratitude. And so our new life as a trio began. Just a few days after Dad moved in, our doorbell rang again. All three of us were stunned by the figures displayed on the intercom screen. Mom and my sisters were standing there. Why here? Shocked and bitter past memories made my breath hitch. But I had to face them. I didn't know what they would do next. In a panic, I opened the door. "Wow, I didn't expect you to be living in such a fancy place. I thought you were scraping by in some rundown apartment." Hearing Mom's voice after such a long time, all I could feel was resentment. "Why are you here?" "Your father's mobile had your address in it. I had no idea Emily even had a mobile phone." "Why would you give him your contact info but not us? Are you honoring the wrong person?" Just as before, Grace arrogantly looked down at me. After Mom's words, seeing her like this, Mom smiled satisfied and spoke again. "Well, never mind. Is your father here? We're having some trouble without him." Even though she said they were in trouble, there were no signs of actual distress. All three of them were smirking. "In trouble? But you're the ones who kicked him out." "You've become quite sassy, haven't you? So he is here. Move aside." "No," I yelled at Mom and her group. Mom's typical overbearing tone and her condescending remarks about me fueled my irritation. It would have been impossible in the past, but I had changed, all thanks to Ethan. However, Mom's irritation became apparent as she raised her voice. "When did I ever give you permission to talk back? Just move."
You can't even listen to what I say.
I'm not the same person I used to be. I won't be pushed around by you, Mom. I refused firmly. Ethan came up beside me, trying to shoo Mom and the others away. Despite our efforts, Mom and her group wouldn't leave. We repeated, "Move," and "No," until tired of the ordeal or maybe having given up. Mom was the one to break first.
"That's enough. I don't want to hear any more from you. If you won't move, can you at least let us know when the money will be deposited in our account? It's really annoying that all you can do is put money in, and you can't even do that." I was speechless at Mom's words. How did she think she's been able to live without working? My anger reached its peak. From now on, Dad will be living with us. Dad and I will no longer be pushed around by you guys. Please divorce Dad and stop causing him pain. As I couldn't hold back my words any longer, the response from my mom was something I hadn't anticipated. "Don't make it sound like I'm the bad guy. I've been kind enough to stay as a family with a man like him who is low income and can't do a thing. You should be thanking me." "What?" "You're just like your dad, a low-income loser, acting high and mighty, but in the end, all you're doing is licking each other's wounds." I felt like I was about to lose control at Mom's words. I was on the verge of raising my voice, of lashing out, but then my husband spoke. "Emily works hard. She's a supervisor, earning a decent wage. I'd appreciate it if you didn't belittle us with comments about licking wounds."
As my husband stared down Mom, she retorted,
"Don't you dare talk back to me. You're an outsider, so stay quiet."
That's when Mom turned on Ethan. Dad, who should have been in the living room, was suddenly at my side, addressing Mom.
"I've heard enough. We can't impose on Emily and Ethan anymore. Let's get a divorce."
"Dad?" At Dad's words, my sisters chimed in with, "That's fine. That's fine. We don't need a creepy guy like you," one voice called out. Emboldened by my sisters, Mom agreed.
"That's fine by me."
I was dumbfounded by how quickly things had been resolved, but the peace didn't last long.
"But there's one condition. Hand over that house to me, then I'll give you your divorce."
Mom laid out her demand. Just how greedy could this woman be? But Dad quickly agreed to Mom's demand. "Dad, are you sure?" I was shocked, but Dad turned to me and smiled.
"If that's all it takes to get a divorce, it's a small price to pay."
He then turned back to Mom, his face serious.
"I'll do as you ask. Leave for today. I'll come over tomorrow."
With that, Dad sent Mom and my sisters home. They continued to belittle me until the end, but I didn't care. I felt guilty for pushing a divorce and causing Dad to lose his home. But Dad patted my shoulder.
"It's not your fault, Emily. In fact, I'm glad you spoke up."
The next day, Dad went back home one last time with the divorce papers. He made Mom fill out the divorce application, handled some paperwork, and packed his belongings. When Dad came back from our family home, he looked somehow lighter. It was sad to see the house go to Mom and my sisters, but if Dad felt relieved, I was okay with it. A few months later, Dad told me what had happened to Mom and my sisters. They had taken the family home as part of the divorce settlement and planned to live lavishly by selling it. However, the house was old. The location wasn't great. They couldn't sell the house or land for much, and demolition costs ate into the proceeds. In the end, they were left with almost nothing. Now, without a home or savings, Mom didn't work. Neither did Grace or Ashley have stable jobs. And with Dad gone, the same Dad they ridiculed for his low income status while they leaned on him for living expenses, the trio found themselves in dire straits. They tried seeking help, showed up at our house several times, but we never opened the door to them. Still, they refused to give up. causing commotion at the front porch. I finally had to tell them through the intercom, "If you make any more noise, I'll call the cops." That sent them packing. Now it seems they're barely managing, renting an apartment that's too cramped for 3. Even Mom, who never worked before, was seemingly forced to get a job. That's how desperate they were. Despite all the times they made fun of Dad and I as a trio, they now seem to be constantly bickering among themselves. They appear to be blaming each other for their current circumstances. People rarely change. With neither Dad nor me around anymore, the ones they used to ridicule, they can't help but find someone else to target. It seems they're destined to lead lives filled with both physical and emotional poverty. Meanwhile, our lives have taken the polar opposite trajectory. Despite all their mockery about Dad being low income, he had actually been trading stocks for years, amassing a fortune. We only learned about this after the divorce was finalized. Dad feared that if any information leaked out, the trio would try to seize his assets, so he had decided not to mention it until the divorce was over. That's probably why he didn't mind giving up the family home. Now we're living comfortably in a new house that Dad built with his wealth. He quit his job to focus on his stocks. My husband and I have jobs too, so we're not struggling financially. We support each other while each maintaining our own financial independence. We hope to build the loving family that we couldn't have when we were young, from here on out.
We were barely past saying I do when my sister-in-law, Gina, decided to drop a bomb right in front of us, exclaiming, "I'm pregnant with your husband's child." Talk about a cheap soap opera twist. She really went there. But if she thinks she can corner us, she's got another thing coming. Time to show the strength of our marital bond. Here goes our counter-strike. My name is Tina. Every spring, I find myself chuckling over that incident from over 2 decades ago. Back then, I was busy planning my wedding to Benedict, a guy I'd been dating since our middle school days. We parted ways for college, but a high school reunion brought us back together and rekindled our romance. Sounds like a cliche. Well, it was just one of those bonds that wasn't easy to break, that's all. But as we prepared to tie the knot, there was a problem we couldn't ignore. Gina. My husband's family tree is a bit complex. First off, my husband and his sister aren't blood related. Their parents had previous marriages and blended their families when they remarried. For the record, my husband is Marcia's son, and Gina is Miguel's. Sadly, Marcia passed away, leaving my husband with no blood ties to his current family. Yet Miguel treated both my husband and Gina without favoritism, offering a wealth of love, as my husband would say, even more than most biological families might. But Gina, she started off close with my husband, until one day in high school, she decided she hated him because he reminded her of an ex who had dumped her. A truly bizarre reason. From what I heard, my husband's hairstyle back then slightly resembled that of her ex. So my husband changed his hair, trying to be considerate, only to be told, "A guy who fusses over his looks that much? Absolutely not my type." And that made her disdain for him even worse. To be toyed with over a hairstyle? What a sorry state of affairs. Nevertheless, Miguel hoped for sibling harmony. I get it. My husband understood Miguel's wishes and tried to mend fences time and again, but things just never improved. So naturally, we agonized over whether to invite her to our wedding. Out of respect for Miguel, we should. My husband also longed for a complete family gathering. But was it even possible to include her without a hitch? Would her attendance lead to trouble? The concerns were undeniable. Not sending a wedding invitation could be too blunt, potentially digging an even deeper rift. We should at least try to be open-hearted in our approach. We weren't at odds with her or anything. We didn't need to be best friends, but we hoped for a decent relationship. After many discussions with my husband, I decided to invite her, ready for any outcome. And then, to our surprise, we thought she would decline, but she promptly replied with an "I will attend." The thought of a fresh start with her at our wedding was, needless to say, something we looked forward to. But in the few months after receiving her RSVP, various problems erupted. Back then, I was trying my best to get closer to Miguel. I'd drop by my in-laws with a little gift or a side dish for dinner. I was more involved with my husband's family than he was, who rarely went back home. In hindsight, I might have not needed to try so hard, but this was all new to me. It was my first marriage, and there was no blood connection between Miguel and my husband. To top it off, my husband and his sister were at odds. And Gina, as a woman, I thought that by blending into the family, maybe, just maybe, I could change the dynamics of the entire household. In my own way, I was overly eager. Whether Miguel knew of my inner turmoil or not, he always welcomed me warmly. He was truly kind. But the problem was, still Gina. At that time, she had caused some trouble at work, got fired, and had become a pro at letting her parents take care of her. In other words, unemployment. And she showed no signs of job hunting. It was even dubious whether she had properly handled her post-employment affairs. After a while, she started greeting me. Considering she used to ignore me, this was progress, right? But things weren't that simple.
Tina, you're here again. Must be tough trying to win over the in-laws. You're not after Dad instead of my brother, are you?
It might have been her idea of a joke, but there was always an unnecessary comment. However, she would say nice things too, like,
"That salad you made the other day was delicious. Teach me how to make it."
So there were aspects of her I couldn't hate. Maybe she didn't understand the implications of her banter and meant no harm. That's how I started to see her in a better light. But as the wedding approached, her true colors began to show. One day, as usual, I visited my in-laws' home and was chatting with Miguel when his daughter came downstairs and suddenly started rummaging through my bag. "Hey, what are you doing?"
"Chill out. I'm heading out. And can I borrow some makeup? I've run out of mine."
"What? No, that's not okay." Of all things, she was after my lipstick. I couldn't possibly lend it to her. Even if she didn't mind, it was completely out of the question for me.
"Stingy, huh? Then give it to me."
"No way, that's impossible." Before I could finish, Miguel scolded her. "Don't go through other people's stuff without asking." She seemed to give up reluctantly under her father's reprimand, but muttered under her breath, barely audible,
"Ah, annoying,"
and left. Miguel apologized for his daughter's rudeness, but she showed no sign of remorse. But that's not the point. She's always been a bit out there. But was she always the type to snoop through others' belongings? I was stewing over her behavior when the reason behind it became clear. It was 1 week before the wedding. Out of the blue, she called.
"Hey, can you let me off with a wedding gift around $50?
"What?" I was dumbfounded when she said she found something nice at a flea market and was trying to haggle with the seller.
"I mean, I'm a bit short on cash. I admit, it's my fault for only using expensive makeup."
Well, she's been unemployed for about 3 months, so running out of money makes sense, right? But then there should be unemployment benefits coming in at some point. I can't believe she's in such dire straits. Unlike my contemplative stance, she was lighthearted.
"Oh, don't tell Dad about this."
A wedding gift is about the thought, after all.
"Exactly. So $50 is okay, right?"
"Wait, what?" Gifts are about the thought, but there is a customary amount. Weddings cost money, and I wish she'd respect the usual rate. Trying to convey my feelings as tactfully as possible, she took it as, lucky me, $50 is okay. Oh no, this is going to be hard to correct without making it awkward. Money is such a delicate topic, even among close family. But $50 is really too little. I hate to say this, but can we make it at least $300? I asked hesitantly, feeling a bit anxious. Her response was outrageous.
"What? Then I won't attend. It's just my brother's wedding anyway."
"Wait, hold on."
"But I don't have the money. If I have to choose between money and my brother's wedding,
Money is obviously more important, she declared. I just wish my husband could have been here. Unfortunately, it was just the two of us. Given the outrageousness of the situation, I really wanted to say, well, that's too bad, we decline your offer too. As the wedding approached, I had hoped that my husband and she might reconcile. Would my actions now end up saddening Miguel and my husband? After hesitating, I said something I didn't mean at all. Then $50 is fine. Even though it was a spur of the moment, I was frustrated by my own weakness. She hung up the phone cheerfully without a word of thanks, saying, "Really? That helps a lot." I was left with nothing but emptiness. Can't she at least say thank you? I felt ashamed of my own poor judgment for thinking I could trust her a little. I no longer had any clue about her true nature. I hadn't been able to bring myself to talk to my husband about her wedding gift before the day of the ceremony. And then the big day arrived. Being the bride was more hectic than expected. I was busy from morning. It's busier than I thought, despite all our planning. I thought when I saw Gina off to the side in a corridor of the lobby. Despite my mixed feelings about the gift situation, I was glad she had come. Just as I was about to approach her, her angry voice filled the air. "That's what I'm saying. I'm not satisfied."
Not satisfied? But that was the deal from the start.
"Why is it always me who ends up feeling shortchanged?"
Gina was trying to stop a man named Mon from walking away. Should I not have come closer? As I looked on confused, Mon gave me a forced, congratulatory message.
Congratulations on this occasion.
He was a friend of my husband and a guest at the reception. Why were Gina and my husband's friend arguing on our wedding day? What was their relationship? He hurriedly said,
"Well, see ya,"
and left. The awkwardness lingered. Just me and her left standing there. "Hey, what's going on with you and him?" I couldn't help but ask her.
"It's nothing. Leave me alone."
She walked away in a different direction than the man. My husband had seen the entire scene from a hidden spot. "Hey, you haven't forgotten that today is supposed to be our special day, have you?" Confused beyond measure, my heart remained in turmoil throughout the wedding, feeling like I had witnessed something I shouldn't have. The ceremony itself went well, fortunately without Gina causing a scene or anything of that sort. The next morning, I was expecting a lovey-dovey start, typical of newlyweds, but reality hit with the jarring sound of the doorbell. Miguel was on the intercom yelling with an intensity I'd never seen before.
"Get out here, quick."
"What's the matter?" My husband and I exchanged a look, braced ourselves, and opened the front door.
"Yes?"
Greeted by my husband, Miguel's anger ramped up.
"What on earth have you done?" "Huh?"
Miguel, practically on the brink of tears with rage, glared at my husband.
"I'm pregnant with your husband's child. Here's the ultrasound picture."
Gina brandished a photo and shouted. "Huh? My husband's child?" I automatically looked at him, and he shook his head vigorously, more shocked than I was, denying it. Mouthing wordlessly, he stammered.
That
what?"
Yesterday.
Ah, now it makes sense. Understanding dawned on me, and I nodded involuntarily. My husband nodded back. It seemed my understanding had translated to him as well. Yes, we both remembered the heated argument between Gina and my husband's friend at the wedding, guessing the tangle in their relationship. Should we set a little trap? My husband strongly nodded to my suggestive glance. He would surely get my intention. Miguel, suspecting our eye contact, challenged.
"What are you two whispering about? What are you planning to do? Divorce Tina and prioritize your family? You have a child to raise."
Miguel was fuming. Well, if this tale were true, his reaction would be justified. So shall we, a couple in sync, pull off a bit of a sketch?
"You two? You never broke up?"
I muttered in a fading voice, and my husband apologized softly.
"Sorry."
"Good job, my husband. He got the whole message." At our exchange, Miguel exclaimed.
"What? Break up? What do you mean?"
Gina told me she was being forced into the relationship. She said she hated you because you resembled an ex, but that was a lie, and she grew to hate you because you were forcing yourself on her.
She looked confused, uncertain how to respond to the turn of events. Ah, I see. She crafted a narrative where she was coerced into a relationship by my husband. Her goal must have been our divorce. Yet the sketch my husband and I are about to perform is a far cry from the scenario she anticipated. Life doesn't always go according to plan. Now it's time for our counterattack.
My sister and I have been in love since we were kids. You said I resembled your ex, but surprise, that ex is actually me.
My husband delivered a splendid assist, fully tuned in to my feelings. We dated in middle school, but we broke up in high school after he realized our relationship. We reconnected at the reunion, and since he said he was single, I took the leap into marriage. To be betrayed like this, it's unbearable. Following my husband's lead, I continued with an impeccable act. Miguel, completely unaware of our marital farce, exclaimed,
"This makes no sense. What in the world is going on?"
I raised my voice in feigned anger. My husband, he lied about breaking up and got engaged to me, all the while still dating Gina. He's been cheating the whole time. This is outright infidelity. I can't stand it any longer. I'm getting a divorce, and I'll be expecting compensation from the involved parties. Miguel was at a loss for words. His head hung low. My husband kept up his act.
"I'm truly sorry for deceiving you for so long. My sister and I will make sure to pay the compensation."
Upon my husband's resigned statement, she leaned forward and shouted, "That's impossible. There's no way you can take compensation." "Why not? How can you say I don't deserve compensation after what I've been through?" I countered. My husband chimed in.
"That's right. Our affair is definitely infidelity. Accept it, pay up the compensation, and let's move on to a happy life with the kids."
Miguel was already accepting our claims.
"Hey, you better come to terms with it too. Unless, of course, you have something different to say."
Her complexion turned a sudden shade of pale. "Ugh! Fine. The child, it's all a lie." We knew that all along. My husband spends most of his time working and dedicating himself to me, a serious man who got promoted after a few years of dating. He's not the despicable type to cheat with 2 women.
"Why would you tell such a lie? Then the child? Whose sonogram is that?"
Miguel shook her, his irritation clear. Still, she remained silent.
"It's my friend's kid, right?"
What? How did you?
Her eyes bulged in shock at my husband's words. It seems we guessed right.
"I heard the rumors from our classmates. You and he were dating. I've heard quite a bit. I even know about the argument you two had yesterday." "What do you mean?"
Miguel pressed her for answers. Shaken by Miguel's uncharacteristic sternness, she began to stutter out the whole story. About 1.5 years ago, she had casually met him at a bar and they hit it off, which led to an intimate relationship. He had a family and children. Knowing all this, she continued the affair. Unable to let go of the thrill of infidelity, she became incapable of stopping. Eventually, she got pregnant and tried to get him to take responsibility, but he wouldn't hear of it since the affair was consensual from the start. She hadn't been able to contact him afterward, but they happened to run into each other at our wedding, which apparently led to a fierce argument.
I was just so mad after getting dumped so harshly. Then Dad found the ultrasound picture. How could I say the guy was married? I was scrambling for excuses. It felt like I was the only one cursed with bad luck. So bitter. I figured if I'm going down, might as well drag everyone with me. So I blurted out the baby was my brother's, thinking serve you right if my brother and his wife had a huge fight and divorced right after the wedding. Maybe that would give me some relief. As she spoke with an almost don't you feel sorry for me fervor, it was clear it was just a parade of selfish excuses. On the wedding day, after hearing rumors about Gina from classmates, my husband had 2 guesses. One was if the rumor was true, then possibly Gina,
sister-in-law might be carrying a friend's child. Gina showed no signs of being on unemployment benefits. My husband speculated.
Maybe she's not receiving benefits because she quit her job due to pregnancy.
The reason she left her last job was only ever described as trouble, which she never elaborated on, deepening the suspicion. With a workplace dominated by men and old-fashioned male chauvinistic attitudes, he figured maybe announcing her pregnancy there caused friction and resulted in the said trouble. The other worry was that she might be jealous of me. Her frequent shifts in attitude towards me, once affectionate, could well stem from envy over my seemingly happy life with him. And with her impulsive nature, my husband feared she might do something rash to us as a couple, and this pregnancy fiasco was the result. Well, thanks to hashing out this topic endlessly last night, we managed to handle it on the fly. A misstep could have easily led to mutual distrust, maybe even divorce. I couldn't help but respect my husband for nailing the situation with almost perfection. Because of him, our relationship was saved. Though whatever she said, I never would have doubted my husband.
Don't be ridiculous. It's too shallow. It's your fault for being involved with a married man in the first place. There's no excusing you.
But it couldn't be helped. I'm a woman, too. There are times when such things are fun.
Gina, yelled at by Miguel, couldn't help but tear up. Yet everyone in the room thought her excuses were baseless.
I'm sorry, brother. I apologize. Please forgive me.
No, I won't forgive you. How many married people do you intend to make unhappy? This is just too much. Even if she's my daughter, I can't forgive this.
Dad, too?
Of course. In the confusion, you deceived Dad as well.
What?
Gina looked surprised for a moment, then, realizing her mistake, quickly said,
I'm sorry.
She might have intended to blame the trouble of lying about my brother being the father on us, but she didn't realize she had also deceived her beloved Dad. Grasping the gravity of the situation, she collapsed on the spot, crying inconsolably. Miguel offered an apology with,
I'm so sorry.
Gina also apologized through tears, but Miguel was relentless.
Don't cry. Take me to the father of that child in your belly right now,
he demanded, making Gina stand up.
What? What are you going to do?
Apologize to his wife, and let's take responsibility properly. This can't go on.
No. You mean paying compensation? I don't have that kind of money.
Of course, it's about the child. It would be pitiful to let them be affected by your recklessness.
Gina was at a loss for words against Miguel's irrefutable logic. After Miguel and Gina left, my husband said with a sigh,
Man, sorry about all that.
No, it's okay. I never imagined she would come up to us claiming to be pregnant with your child.
Thanks for believing in me.
Of course I do. Hey, should I have scrutinized the ultrasound picture just to be sure?
Oh, give me a break.
He replied with a chuckle. We laughed it off, thinking that, despite the mess, perhaps it was an experience that strengthened our bond as a couple that morning. Later on, Miguel visited the man's home with Gina to apologize to his family. He was served with divorce papers by his wife, who also demanded child support, alimony, and distribution of property. Gina was also sued and had to pay compensation. It turned out that for Mon, Gina was just a fling. There was never any marriage on the cards. Ultimately, the child Gina bore was adopted by Miguel's niece, who hadn't been blessed with her own children. The niece's family was financially stable and cared deeply for the child, who is said to be living happily. Miguel occasionally visits, forging a bond with his grandchild. On the other hand, Gina, unable to forget the thrill of her infidelity, got involved with another married man and was promptly discarded. After finally finding employment, she was fired and is now working part-time. Having been sued for compensation twice, she's now juggling day labor and part-time jobs to make the payments. A dire situation I heard about from Miguel. Since Miguel has disowned his daughter, only God knows the kind of life she's leading now, but bad habits are hard to break. As for us, we were blessed with 2 daughters, and our youngest will finally reach adulthood next year. Our eldest daughter became a physical therapist, wanting to do work that helps people. Perhaps because she was so attached to her sister, our youngest has decided to pursue nursing, chasing after her sister's example and working hard every day. They both assure us that they've got our future care covered, which spurs myself and my husband on to not rely too much on our daughters. Lately, we've been hitting the gym to stay in shape. When we celebrate losing a little weight, our kids tempt us with, "Let's go eat steak and put it back on." It's a constant struggle against our desires. To savor this happiness for a long time, we need to stay healthy. We're determined to enjoy life to the fullest, aiming to see our grandchildren, no, our great-grandchildren. We're gonna give it our all.